Alright, it is springtime, time to plant. Now, I'm running a little bit late because of some technical difficulties, but finally got my seed potatoes and I'm ready to start planting them. I'm going to show you all how to plant them with my preferred method, which is a no-till method using straw. But went to the local feed store and got me a 50-pound bag of red potatoes here. I would have preferred the Yukon Gold, but they were all out. So what it is, it's just a big old bag of sprouted potatoes like this. Now, you don't have to buy these at a feed store if you live in an urban area, and even if you don't, you can use potatoes from Walmart. They don't even have to have started sprouting, but if they do, it's a little bit easier to section them up. Everywhere we see those little eyes, those little divots with, before they sprout, they're just a little hole, almost like a little zit or a pocket in the potato, and that's called the eye of the potato. And from each one of those little spots, a root will sprout like this, and those eventually turn into plants. So conventional wisdom says 2 to 3 eyes. We're going to cut these up. Now, if you leave 2 to 3 eyes on each piece and put them in the ground, you'll have 90% success rate. Each one of them is going to turn into a potato plant. Now I've heard that you can even go down to 1 eye per cube and slice each potato up into like 8 pieces, but you end up sometimes those little sections, those little cubes, like I'll show you. See, if you slice up just 1 eye and a little cube of potato like that, what happens is this cube of root here ends up having to sustain this plant until it gets established and gets its own roots. So if this dries up or runs out of energy for the plant to grow, that potato may die. And if you cut them up with just 1 eye per piece, you're going to end up having more like 70% of them turning into full-grown potato plants. So I'm going to cut them up with 2 to 3 eyes per piece and toss them in the bin here, and then we'll get out to the garden and get them planted. But it's not real critical. I just kind of go through and section up each potato, depending on how big it is, into 4 to 6 pieces. That one ended up being 4. Each one of these sections here is going to end up being a fully grown potato plant with anywhere, from, depending on how much straw you put on the ground and how rich your soil is and how much water comes down and all the factors, you're going to get 8 to 12, sometimes 15 little potatoes off of it. I'd say probably a pound per plant would be a good estimate. And as far as me and my goals this year, I bought 70 pounds total of potato seed. So this is a big old 50-pound bag here. As you can see, it's a pretty beefy bag of potatoes. So if you have a root storage or a cold storage, this is what I'm planning on getting through the winter with. Me and my family, this is going to be our main calorie source, is the potatoes, because in this area they're a lot easier to grow and you get a lot higher yields per acre than grains. But we will still grow some grains for supplemental calorie intake. So a target goal, man, I'd like to have 250 pounds of potatoes in storage this winter. Now that I haven't done any calculations, and I haven't actually tried to do the self-sustenance thing before, so I don't know if that's actually going to be a feasible amount to feed your family through the winter, and I'm sure we're going to be tired of potatoes by the end of it. But that's a good target for me on this first year, since, like I say, here in Oklahoma, northeast Oklahoma, it's the last frost happened about 2 weeks ago. So you can eat, the way that I'm planting these here, you can plant them before the last frost, a couple weeks before. You don't want them to go through a real heavy freeze where the ground's frozen over for a couple weeks, unless you've got them buried in soil. And potatoes know when to sprout up, and they'll come up once it warms up enough. But yeah, ideally you want to have these in the ground before all the trees and grass and weeds start springing up, because they're pretty hardy, and the earlier you get them in the ground, the longer time they have to make their roots before it gets too hot in the summer and they end up dying. So yeah, like I say, we're probably a month late on these this year, but I'm still expecting to get a really good crop of potatoes. So alright, I've got all my potato seed sectioned up, and at this point I've read you can shake them up in a bag with some wood ash, and that'll coat all these spots where you cut and keep them from getting a bacterial infection and rotting. But I've never done that, and I haven't had much problems. If I had some wood ash here, I'd probably just go ahead and do it just for good measure. But out here I've got this bed of straw, which was probably about a half of a round bale that I spread out a couple months ago in the middle of the winter, and I put it on about 18-24 inches deep, and as soon as you rake back the cover here, oh look at that, there's a little mushroom growing in it. So it's already really decomposed right underneath that top layer, and it's full of moisture here. So the idea is, see, now this is the dirt, and this has never been tilled before. This was grass, this was sod, and you can dig your fingers down in there, easily penetrate 4 to 6 inches. It's already been broken up that much just from the decomposition action. And the grass that was growing here, it's all dead. So it's probably worn down. It's degraded down now, about 6 to 10 inches of straw on most of it. And now this is just going to make an excellent microclimate for retaining moisture, and this is going to provide all of the fertilization that we're going to do for these potatoes. What I'm going to do in order to achieve maximum yields, instead of planting in the conventional method of rows and lines, I'm going to spread them all out in more like a hexagonal grid pattern is the goal. But basically I'm just going to throw them all out there and put about 12 inches, give or take, between each plant, and cover this whole patch here. Now this patch is about 12 feet by 12 feet, so what's that end up being? Like about 125 square feet. And I'm going to use about 10 pounds of potato seed to cover this whole area. So I'll show you how I lay them out, and we'll go from there. Alright, I'll give you an idea of how I got them laid out. Spacing is not real critical here if you end up spacing them closer together or further apart, but the idea is that when each one of these plants comes in and starts springing forth, that you want to create a microclimate on top of the straw microclimate. Like all the straw here, you want it to be shaded in with leaves, totally filled in, a full like a canopy over the soil, and that'll provide another layer of insulation and rain retention. So after you get them all spaced out like so, and if you haven't already laid straw out on the ground, like I laid this out in the winter to let it start decomposing and working the sod. But if you're just starting fresh, you can do this right on top of the sod. Just lay them out in this pattern and then cover them up with your 18 to 24 inches of straw, as much as you can, really. I wouldn't put more than 3 feet on there, but anything up to there, they'd be good to go. They will creep their way up through the straw amazingly well. So now I'm just going to go through and open up the straw and drop them down into the soil as deep as I can, just put them without having to work too hard at it. And then just cover them back up with the soil, or cover them up with the straw if you don't have access to the soil. Okay, I've got them all planted in here. Ended up planting this whole 250 square area 250 square foot area, plus this area over here on the side of the blackberries, and over there where there's not anything being used, any of the space being used to grow anything. So like I say, these will grow just fine left alone at this point, but if you can spread more straw in there, or more manure, or any kind of fertilizer, they're going to do even better. So I'm probably going to end up putting another layer of straw in there before too long, probably before they sprout up. So stay tuned and see how they go.